Putin was really humiliated by Prigozhin's march on Moscow. And if it had gone unpunished, which it had for 2 whole months, then Putin was running the risk of somebody else repeating this, or perhaps Prigozhin coming back and launching another stunt. Well, it certainly looks like Putin has had his revenge. As William Burns, the CIA chief, put it, Putin likes his revenge in a dish served cold, and he's really had his day yesterday. It really does seem like that's the case. Putin was really humiliated by Prigozhin's march on Moscow. And if it had gone unpunished, which it had for 2 whole months, then Putin was running the risk of somebody else repeating this, or perhaps Prigozhin coming back and launching another stunt, because there was a lot of opposition, a lot of support for Prigozhin within the top ranks of the army and also within the security services. So something clearly had to be done. But that said, we also know that Prigozhin is a master of disguise. He's operated for many, many years in the shadows. He's also a master of disinformation. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe he was on a different plane and he's just disappeared.
That's the question. What, with confidence, do we know?
We know with confidence that the Russian aviation authorities have said that Prigozhin and one of his main chiefs, Dmitry Utkin, were on the passenger manifest. The Kremlin is still silent. It's yet to confirm his death. And no one is saying anything beyond that. And apart from that, there's a lot of talk on social media. Some supporters of the Wagner group are saying, yes, he's died, but we have no evidence yet.
Russian authorities say they've launched an investigation into the cause of the crash. What are you anticipating?
There have been numerous reports swirling. So the Financial Times this morning is reporting that sort of video of the explosion shows various signs that the aircraft could have been shot down by air defense systems close to Moscow. There are other social media reporting that perhaps there was a terrorist attack. It was some kind of terrorist bomb planted on the plane. Again, we don't know anything yet. The authorities are going to try to retrieve the black box from the plane, and we'll see.
You've mentioned that we haven't heard anything from the Kremlin. What do you think Putin's next move is going to be?
Seems like he's kind of enjoying the uncertainty. And this is good for Putin because, when he's gone after rivals and opponents in the past, he has, of course, always denied any role by the Kremlin. So now we have Kremlin spin doctors coming out trying to put the blame for the crash on Ukrainian security services, trying to cause unrest and other instability in Russia. So Putin will probably remain in the shadows and kind of smile on with satisfaction as the finger pointing starts.
While that happens, what's next for the Wagner group? Because this will be something that potentially significantly shapes what they do next.
Well, the Wagner group, it certainly looks like they've been slowly dismantled over the past 2 months. I mean, we could see very clearly that Putin was not able to move immediately against the Wagner group because they've been operating as a force on behalf of the Russian state in the shadows since 2014. They were essentially a black operations arm for the Kremlin. They existed where the state couldn't operate. So they would be in places, they would carry out operations which were illegal, which the Kremlin couldn't ordinarily be involved in. We saw them, the Wagner group, Prigozhin's companies, very active in the dissemination of disinformation in the 2016 US presidential election campaign. And they've been very active across the Middle East and Africa in shoring up Russian influence in these places. So they really had sort of deeply entrenched interests there, and Putin couldn't uproot and dismantle it immediately. But what we've seen in the 2 months since the aborted mutiny is that gradually these operations have been handed over to other paramilitary groups owned and run by people who are more loyal to Putin.
Obviously, Ukraine is watching very closely to all the developments. There was one report from Ukraine's national resistance that Wagner forces might be moving towards the border with Russia. We can't confirm any of that. In terms of what happens next in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we were hearing earlier from Bill Browder, who said it'd be interesting to hear your analysis on Putin, that he's waiting to see what happens in the States, trying to hold on until November, because who's in power in the White House could significantly change Putin's prospects.
Yeah, I would certainly very strongly agree with that. Unfortunately for Ukraine, a Trump presidency could change the picture entirely. You know, we've heard Trump speak about how there would be no war in Ukraine if he'd been in power. We know that Trump has refused to give arms to Ukraine in the past in an attempt to strong arm them into handing over compromising information on Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. So we know that the type of games that he's played, we know that he's been supportive of Putin in his war against Ukraine. So really, there's an awful lot riding on the outcome of this presidential election for the Ukrainians and indeed for the rest of the world. Because, you know, if Putin manages to carve up Ukraine, I mean, that means that he has carte blanche to repeat the same actions elsewhere.